Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to start the third and the last day of the EES conference. Are you still full of energy? Yeah, great. My name is Riitta Oksanen. I come from Finland and I'm the Vice President of EES. It is my pleasure to introduce our two keynote speakers this morning. So please do join me in welcoming Helen Simmons and Jeniffer Greene. Helen is a professor of evaluation and education at the University of Southampton in the UK. Helen's experience and expertise focuses on evaluation in education, health, social initiatives. She specializes in democratic evaluation, ethics of evaluation, and qualitative methods. Jeniffer Greene is a professor at the University of Illinois College of Education, Department of Educational Psychology. Her expertise and experience combine theory and practice in qualitative, democratic, and mixed methods approaches to evaluation. Helen and Jeniffer, we are ready to be guided through a discussion on value of democratic evaluation in today's society.
Thank you, Rita, very much. And good morning, everyone. And we're delighted to be here, and we're delighted to see so many of you here as well on this third morning. So we're a little tired, but we hope that, just as you are, but we hope that we will find some energy when we speak, which is now. So this quotation provides a broad framing for what we wish to say today. However, we're going to start at a practical level by inviting you to eavesdrop with us, along with us on a short scenario of evaluation practice. It's titled The Best Laid Plans, and this involves an evaluation of a national job training initiative. This is scene one, and I'm the agency director. This evaluation report on the impacts of our recent job training initiative is really disappointing. The unemployment rate has barely budged despite 3 years of intensive effort.
I couldn't agree more. The job statistics started going up last year, but that momentum has not been sustained. I thought we had a winner in this program as we consulted with all the top employment experts in the country. On their advice, we concentrated our training efforts on semi-skilled, entry-level jobs in technology, where workers are suffering the greatest rates of joblessness. I don't know what went wrong here.
Director of Evaluation.
I am sure the data are accurate and the analyses fully defensible. Our evaluators came from the leading consulting company in the country, so we can't blame the data.
This is not a blame game here. We're all equally committed to doing something to help our jobless citizens gain a job and an adequate income. But it seems we don't really know what that something is. Scene two.
Okay, we have practiced this. Scene two. I did get a job in a tech company up north, but the commute is not affordable in time or money.
Tech jobs are not for me. They require too much school learning, and I was really never very good at that.
I really love technology, and I am good at it, but no one is hiring people over 50 for entry-level jobs.
I wonder whatever happened to that evaluation of our training program. You know, the one where we did those focus groups. Did you ever hear what they found out? This scenario is a familiar scene in government evaluations in many countries. Here, in this one, policymakers designed a job training program and commissioned its evaluation with good intentions, but with radically insufficient consultation with those the program was intended to help. Furthermore, the evaluators made the same mistake. So little was learned about the apparent mismatch of the program with the needs of the unemployed, or about why the initiative failed.
More generally, many of our government-sponsored evaluations today rely on sophisticated methodologies that rigorously assess program impact on the average. Yet the utilitarian privileging of average effects yields little information about the effectiveness of the program for those who are least well served, for those who are different, for those who are suffering repeated injustices. In another corner of our evaluation community, and in marked contrast to utilitarian average effects evaluations, sometimes evaluations get mired in their own participatory and inclusive processes and fail to actually conduct an evaluation that offers insights of consequence or structurally advances equity in that context. Both extremes we consider to be misdirected, narrow, inconsequential, and undemocratic evaluation practices. In this presentation, we make a strong case for democratic evaluation, especially in these challenging times. We recognize that democracy has different histories and thus different meanings in the varied context of Europe. Our focus is on relatively universal democratic ideals and our own experiences in the theory and practice of democratic evaluation. How this might be enacted in your country may well be different.
In the current political climate, it may seem odd to be arguing for democratic evaluation when in many countries we are far from having a functioning democracy that serves the interests of all people. It may have always been thus. Yet currently, there are more threats to social and political equality than we have seen for many years. Threats like the commodification of social policies and the disrespect shown to many groups in society under the spurious assumption that all people benefit from choice in a free market economy. Issues of immigration remain at the forefront of national debates that often foreground economics rather than equity. Education and health disparities among different strata in society persist, such that being born into a poor family still significantly shapes life chances and opportunities. And in many countries, perhaps especially our own, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening at an alarming rate. Evaluation, of course, is but one player that aspires to influence policymaking in these areas. Yet, as evaluators, we must do what we can in the spaces we have when we conduct evaluation in ways that aggressively honor democratic values so that public policy is informed and shaped by all. It is time to argue more strongly than ever before, that democratic evaluation becomes an integral part of discourse and decision-making. The alternative is a sterile, disconnected, and likely increasingly inconsequential evaluation practice.
We interrupt our narrative here to listen to evaluation news currently on the airwaves that bears on our presentation of democratic evaluation. We thank our colleagues for sharing these scenarios from their own practice and take full responsibility for the elaborations we have made to them. This is the BBC International News.
From Spain, we hear that the widely acclaimed school-based drug prevention program for young teenagers, Di No a las Drogas, failed to address the critical issues in drug use that affect girls. Even though research clearly indicates gender differences in motivations for and habits of drug use, the program was designed primarily on the basis of boys' drug use patterns. Further, because the evaluation of the program was conducted without attention to gender differences, girls' experiences were rendered invisible.
From Sweden, the future of the Women's Center, a nonprofit agency serving immigrant women in Stockholm's poorest neighborhoods, is in jeopardy. The city must cut its budget due to smaller than anticipated tax revenues from the business sector, and city leaders are unsure of the value of the center's services. The center has appealed to the Swedish evaluation community for assistance in demonstrating the effectiveness and vital necessity of their work for these often hidden immigrant women.
And from Ireland, we learn that the evaluation of a pilot program serving early school leavers from 4 communities indicated that the program failed to achieve its aim. Launched with considerable fanfare, as it is the brainchild of a famous Irish celebrity, the program was designed to help the youth participants develop the skills and sensibilities needed to get a job. Yet only 1 person out of more than 20 obtained employment. So the program is considered a failure and will soon be discontinued. Now, what would a democratic evaluator do in situations such as these? Stay tuned. We will check in later with the BBC. We now return to our argument, how democratic evaluation can be a force for democratic governance, especially in today's troubled times.
Many approaches to evaluation can be said to be democratically oriented, in that they aspire to influence the decision-making process by providing impartial empirical evidence to help policymakers make informed decisions about future direction and investment. They thereby trust our public officials to do the right thing in the genuine public interest. Our public officials, alas, too rarely do this right thing. And so evaluation which simply informs policy does not powerfully or consequentially advance democratic values or contribute to a democratic society. What is needed is a process of political engagement to ensure that evaluation is of equitable consequence for those it affects and offers all citizens the opportunity to debate the findings. For evaluation is a political practice that addresses the central questions of who gets what in society, whose values matter, who gets to see what about whom and when, and what the consequences are for all stakeholders of an evaluation, irrespective of their social position or political power. Historically, there are two approaches that do engage directly with the political nature of evaluation by recognizing evaluation as inherently and inevitably entangled with and constitutive of the politics and values of public decision-making. These two approaches are Barry McDonald's democratic evaluation and deliberative democratic evaluation as advocated by Ernie House.
We wish to acknowledge here that our understanding of and commitment to democratic evaluation owes much to Barry and Ernie. We wish to further observe that both Barry's and Ernie's ideas about democratic evaluation came into currency in a particular socio-political context of their times, intertwined with each man's biography. Barry, for example, developed his evaluation model at a time in the United Kingdom when government control over public institutions was gaining strength, thereby jeopardizing the traditional valuing of individual privacy and liberty. Influenced by his Scottish roots, he sought to reaffirm evaluation's commitments to social justice and to the autonomy of judgment and respect for all persons that are central features in his model.
And Ernie's deep commitment to egalitarian ideals was influenced in part by the multiple civil rights movements happening in the US during his early adulthood, juxtaposed against his own upbringing in a difficult family in a very poor region of America's Midlands. In short, our own values and biography, along with the particular socio-political tenor of the times in which we live and work, influence which evaluation models we espouse. They do not stand alone.
Our views on democratic evaluation are anchored in the premise that all evaluations advance some values and that we need to explicitly state and take responsibility for which values are promoted in our work. Our views are further anchored in our belief that democratic values are the most defensible ones we can advance in our practice, methodologically, politically, socially, and ethically. Now, our argument is not new, but it is one we believe needs reinvigoration in current times. The key principles in our vision are these. Democratic evaluation explicitly advances core values of equity, access, justice, fairness, and human dignity. Is inclusive of the values and interests of all legitimate stakeholders. Negotiates the generation of evaluation knowledge through procedures that are equitable, fair, and just. Is independent of vested or powerful interests in the management structure for the evaluation, in the evaluation process, and in reporting.
Is educative in the process of conducting the evaluation and in providing robust, fair-minded evaluative knowledge to inform ongoing public debates about important social issues. Is accessible in language, content, and form to policymakers, practitioners, beneficiaries, and citizens, so all can contribute to the policy-making processes of our societies. Is of consequence in that it makes a difference to people's lives, especially those who experience disadvantage. And is ethical in respecting the human dignity of all individuals with regard to their concerns and differences. These principles are further translated into a set of procedures to guide the conduct of evaluation and ensure that the principles are enacted in practice. Examples of these procedures are: all participants will be granted equal opportunity to contribute to the generation of evaluation knowledge. Evaluation reports will be negotiated with those concerned on criteria of accuracy, relevance, and fairness. No one person or group will have the right to veto the external evaluation report. With procedures such as these, as Nigel Norris has recently stated, democratic evaluation tries to create the social conditions for organizational and institutional learning. It is a strategy for enabling a democratic society to live up to its ideals and aspirations.
We present this vision of democratic evaluation as an aspiration. But of course, it's important to remember that all evaluation is an aspiration. We conduct evaluation in contexts that often impose serious constraints on time and resources, as well as political agendas that threaten to compromise the professional norms and ideals of our practice. The question is, how do we successfully conduct strong, independent, and consequential evaluation in these contexts without being co-opted by funders, collusive with selected stakeholders, or vulnerable to censoring of our findings? Well, for a start, by not capitulating, we suggest, in the face of such threats, ever mindful of holding strong to our commitment to embody and advance democratic practice. This reminds us of Tennyson's adage, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And when the going gets tough and negotiation seems impossible, to recall John F. Kennedy's words, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." Or the words of Orwell in his famous principle of liberty, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." This is the aspiration of democratic evaluation. Our hope is that it can and will offer a strong counterpoint to the performative and economically driven public discourse so dominant today and so highly controlled by the top 1%, so that one day citizens, you, me, our neighbors, friends, as well as strangers, will reclaim authority and voice in public decision-making, thereby nudging our policy-making processes toward greater equity, justice, fairness, and human dignity.
Underpinning a democratic approach to evaluation are several familiar philosophical positions, such as the politics of choice from Macpherson and the egalitarian premises of John Rawls' theory of justice. A further philosophical concept which we believe can importantly contribute to the reinvigoration of democratic evaluation is that of epistemic justice. Epistemic justice defines truth as arising from the knowledge and experiences of all who are involved in a given set of social interactions, particularly those who are marginalized. Following some feminist epistemologies, epistemic justice is premised on the idea that perspectives drawn from the margins of any given discourse are not only different from mainstream perspectives, but their inclusion results in more truthful representations of the world. This concept arose from critiques of the radical relativism of epistemic diversity, a critique to which those of us who hold a relativist position on social knowledge may wish to listen particularly well. Epistemic diversity posits that diverse paradigms, including traditional post-positivism, social constructivism, feminisms, post-structuralisms, and so on, each of these starts from a different set of assumptions about the social world, so there is no way to adjudicate among them. And what we are left with is what is true for you is true for you, and what is true for me is true for me.
So what is needed, therefore, is a rejection of the radical relativism of epistemic diversity in favor of a strong commitment to inclusion and equity of voice. This is precisely what democratic evaluators have been advocating for decades. The concept of epistemic justice makes the argument at the philosophical level. This concept further encourages those with power in the social world as currently configured to take more seriously the diversity of voices in our evaluations, because we silence large segments of the community of knowers of which we are all a part at our own peril. The truth of our social world will elude us until we learn what it means to hear across the social spectrum.
Seeking justice has always been an aspiration in democratic evaluation, but this remains elusive. We may get closer to realizing this aspiration if we paid more attention to two features of epistemic injustice. The first is testimonial injustice. This happens when an individual is treated unethically in her capacity as a knower. For example, when an immigrant woman's account of her experiences in a foreign culture is perceived as unreliable, or precedence is given to a more powerful protagonist, namely that of the immigration official processing her application. The second form is hermeneutical injustice. This arises when an individual cannot make sense of her experience because of her lack of knowledge or resources, her marginal position in society, or perhaps more often, society's lack of concern with the experience she is attempting to articulate. For example, how many immigrant women have been disenfranchised by authorities who discount or even invalidate their experiences, rendering the women fearful of voicing their genuine needs?
Let us now turn to the field and share 3 excerpts from actual democratic evaluations that each illustrate one of our democratic principles in action, though of course in practice they are intertwined and mutually supportive. In this first example, we foreground the principle of independence. This was an external evaluation of a national pilot innovatory curriculum program for health practitioners, commissioned by a government department in one English-speaking country in the European Union. The evaluation team was selected for its declared independence, not only of the program, the commissioner, and vested interests of participants and stakeholders, but also the country, as they didn't trust their own to produce a fair account. The political context was contentious, and stakeholders disagreed in particular about who should have the power in shaping the initiative. Independence was threatened very early on in the evaluation when the manager of the program in the ministry insisted the team visit the program site to investigate a union complaint from students and send him an immediate report to assure the minister that all was well. But not long after, the on-site project leader, having heard of the manager's demand, advised the evaluation director not to come, or you will be regarded as an arm of the government. So the evaluation team here was caught in the middle of a serious political dispute, which was not of their making or of their concern, and a conflict between the program's governing agency and the on-site project leader. Feelings were running high and tension increasing. This challenging situation was only resolved after much deliberation by the lead evaluator first making time for both parties to state their position more than once and to be heard non-judgmentally, and second, by reminding them of the democratic principles of procedure to which they had agreed, specifically the inclusion of all stakeholder perspectives and the no right to veto or exert power over others. So the democratic procedures thus provided a structure within which rationality and reasonableness could persuade in the face of political and professional differences, and thus safeguarded the independence of the evaluation. And furthermore, the resolution had an important consequence in signalling to all parties that they could work out their differences within such a structure, and it resulted in further funding for a workshop facilitated by the evaluation team where 120 people representing 7 stakeholding groups, from the top consultants in the hospital down to the nurses, to discuss and deliberate the implications of the findings and plan an agreed way forward.
Our second example illustrates the potential power of the educative dimension of democratic evaluation to challenge political rhetoric, conventional wisdom, and other forms of taken-for-granted assumptions. At the time of this U.S. evaluation, news headlines regularly featured the epidemic of teenage pregnancy, rampant especially in the cities and among poor and minority girls. Politicians weighed in with demands that teenage mothers, 1, return to school as soon as possible, and 2, not get pregnant again. In this politicized context, an evaluation was conducted of a local program that provided pregnant girls with direct support in securing housing, food, and health care for themselves and their future baby. The evaluator used a multiple program theory-oriented evaluation where she generated separate program theories for the teenagers, the staff, and the board with the specific educative intent of fostering reflection and critique on the program's design by all stakeholders. Not surprisingly, these program theories were quite different one from another. The evaluator met with each group and then convened the staff and the agency board together to discuss the key differences in their respective program theories. In this discussion, the board realized that their expected outcomes matched the political rhetoric of the day: go back to school and don't get pregnant again. The staff, in contrast, believed that these longer-term outcomes involved life circumstances and events well beyond their power to control. Further deliberations offered opportunities for critical reframing of program direction, both within the agency and among concerned citizens in the larger community.
This third example is again from an independent national evaluation, this time for the development of a new concept of police training. It illustrates in particular the power of the negotiation principle in generating actionable evaluation knowledge. Unlike the previous earlier example, the political context here was not volatile. There was a substantial degree of acceptance from the administrative authority that change in police training was needed. Data were gathered from over 8 stakeholder groups, from the top commissioners in the Home Office to police federations and associations at different levels, to police training authorities, to metropolitan and county councils. The democratic procedures took account of these several levels of power and authority in police organizations, encouraging contributions from all, privileging none, and not allowing any one group to dominate. This established a strong degree of trust between the evaluation team and the police participants, further enhanced by having police officers on the evaluation team. And there was a transparent and inclusive structure of evaluation reporting. The evaluation team reported to a representative steering committee chaired by the Home Office. This committee reported to the Police Training Council, itself a representative committee, and this council then advised the minister. If you think that's complicated, it was. These equitable procedures and inclusive structures created conditions for extensive contribution and negotiation, which enabled agreement to be reached in the very process of the evaluation among all the relevant parties on all 143 of the evaluation recommendations. The parties included those responsible for implementing the findings, and so they were, and all of this averted contestation of the findings at the end. Further, such extensive negotiation in the process advanced the development of the new police training and also ensured that the final report was published. This in a country where open reporting, even of publicly funded evaluation, is far from standard procedure. Having given such strong backing to the initiative, the minister's credibility would have been damaged had he curtailed or allowed others to curtail the wider publication of what, to all intents and purposes, was already public knowledge.
In this final section, we move back.
Sorry. That's all right. We practiced this, you see. In this final section of our presentation, we move back to our title, Against the Odds, for sure, but worth it? Clearly, we believe it is, even if it seems impossibly difficult in our contemporary political realities, marked as they are by polarization and disharmony. In many countries, we have at best a residual democracy where the political and moneyed classes dominate and go to great lengths to silence their critics and preserve their power. The administrative context for evaluation, furthermore, involves multi-layered regulatory mechanisms, an emphasis on outcomes and performance, and few opportunities for dialogue, deliberation, or even conversation. And evaluation reports too often fail to make the news.
Let us now move back to our news desk, for we have some important updates that offer practical pathways for realizing democratic evaluation's promise in these challenging times. This is the BBC International News.
6 months ago, we reported on the disappointing evaluation of a drug prevention program for teenagers in Spain, where gender differences were overlooked. Spain, I'm pleased to report, has today announced the setting up of an independent evaluation centre for equity and diversity to which all evaluation proposals and subsequent reports have to be submitted to ensure that they encompass, in conception, process, and outcome, a declared commitment to democratic ideals of equity and justice. Gender equity will be central to the Centre's mission. We are further delighted to report that the director of this new evaluation centre will be Professor Maria Bistello, who has been pressing for recognition of gender differences in evaluation for many years.
3 months ago, the Women's Center serving immigrant women in Stockholm was about to lose its funding. But there has been a surprising policy reversal. The evaluator of this center, Professor Werner Denvall, held a series of public forums for discussion of the evaluation findings. These forums offered safe spaces for immigrant women to testify about their experiences and their lives, in their own words, and to be heard, a clear instance of epistemic justice. The forums further showcased how the work of the center assists the women in negotiating and even overcoming the obstacles they face. In these ways, the evaluation contributed to stable funding for the center.
And finally, an update on the disappointing finding of the evaluation of the job training program for early school leavers in Ireland. The intrepid evaluator of this program, Professor Jerry McNamara, has reported additional results showing that even though only one young person got a job, many strong educational confidence-building benefits occurred. The program was subsequently revised to relate more directly to the needs and interests of the youth participants, and 2 Irish government departments have now joined forces to fund a creative education and employment unit to extend this revised way of working with young people throughout Ireland and to other countries in Europe.
This is all very good news. The news shows that evaluation can indeed strengthen democratic practices in our societies. When evaluators take responsibility for ensuring that democratic values are enacted and upheld in their practice, when evaluation is independent of all vested interest, including commissioners, and simultaneously inclusive of all stakeholder perspectives and standpoints, when evaluation knowledge is epistemically just.
When democratic structures, like public forums, are created for open and inclusive deliberation of evaluation findings and their implications. And when existing political forums are also used to ask, whatever happened to the evaluation of Programme A? Or, what is the government going to do about B? Though hopefully our parliamentarians will be more receptive than these.
We are not arguing here that evaluators alone can democratize the world, but we are declaring that we should do what we can in the spaces we have to advance democracy. We declare this even as we agree with Churchill. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. That democracy is the best form we have has recently been reinforced by a political commentator who said, "For all its problems, democracy beats all the alternatives. It gives people something they value, the right to express their own opinions."
This something was palpably present a fortnight ago when 84.6% of the Scottish people voted in the referendum on independence. The occasion created multiple forums for political discourse and restored faith in the power of agency by the electorate. The focus of the referendum and the outcome was less important than the fact it signified a vote for a change for autonomy, for wielding power away from the dominant political class, for citizens to claim greater control over their own future. The optimism was incredible, inspired by this event, is already reverberating throughout England and other parts of the world like Catalonia. And the Boston Globe makes the same point. In spaces like these, with hope restored in the basic principle of democracy and people's right to have a say in decisions that affect their lives, democratic evaluation may just become a greater force for the actual enactment of the grand promise of liberty and equality for all. Thank you.
many thanks. Everybody will be energized again after this presentation. Thank you very much. And we still have some time, so I will take a few questions. Who wants to start? Can we have the mic? I'll take a few questions.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation. I was wondering if you could elaborate perhaps a little bit on the role of new forms of democratic engagement, such as social media and these kind of topics.
Thank you. Another question?
Hi, thank you very much. I would love to do democratic evaluation too, and I was wondering if it is much more expensive than regular mediocre evaluation. And also I was thinking that, have you considered this could be something that could be funded by crowdsourcing, for example, because citizens would be very interested in this kind of evaluation, not politicians, so maybe the funding should come from another source. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with these.
I love the questions, and I turn it back to the young people in the audience to answer them. I mean, I love it. You're thinking in ways that I don't think about social media. I'm not active. So I love the questions and the notion of crowdsourcing. I turn it back to all of you to carry forward these visions and ideals with the developments that have happened in the world, like social media and crowdsourcing. I don't know if Helen has something to add, but I love it. I think it's energizing and exciting, and go for it.
Thank you. A few more questions? If not, then I think that we thank one more time our wonderful presenters. Thank you so much.